Stampers, my name is Jackie Bolhuis and I'm from Zeeland, Michigan, and I've been a Stampin' Up! Demonstrator since February of 1995. Yep, that seems like forever, feels like forever, but I gotta tell you, it's been the best job ever. I am starting a brand new video series for you guys called Stamping Basics. You know, the longer you stamp, you kind of forget about some of those basics, and I think I forget to share some of the basics in my my videos. So I thought I would do a whole series just on basics, and this will be perfect for those of you that are new as well. So we're going to do one video a week for a while and just hit basics, different topic each week. So this week we're going to start out with cardstock, because you can't make a card unless you have cardstock. Now, I think I'm going to flip the camera down here because you don't need to see my face. You want to see what I have to show you. So hold on one second. Are you ready to talk cardstock? Like I said, we need cardstock or we can't make a card. So the very first thing I want to share with you guys is how to cut a piece of 8.5 by 11 to make a card, because almost all our cardstock comes in 8.5 by 11, and you can get 2 cards, what I like to just call normal size cards, out of a sheet of cardstock. Now you can cut it one of 2 ways. You can go, if it's 8.5 by 11, half of that is 4 1/4. So on my cutter, I can come up here to 4 1/4, and I can cut it this way, giving me 2 cards this way. So all I need to do then is score it. Now, scoring is a term you might not be familiar with, but it helps your cardstock fold easier. Now, especially when you cut it the long way like this, cardstock's not really made to fold and bend very easily this way. You're going to want to score it to fold it. So now we have 11, so half of that is 5.5. So we'll just come out to 5.5 here, and we'll score this piece. I've got a scoring blade and a cutting blade, both on my cutter at the same time. And now my card will fold real nice and easy in half that way to make my card. Now this would be a card that opens up this way. Some people like to call this, I think, hot dog. I'm not quite sure how that term came about, but more normal, I guess, if there's such a thing that you see more often probably, is again your 8.5 by 11, but this time we're going to cut it this way and go at 5.5, okay, half of the 11. The scoring blade out of there, and we're going to cut like so, because now we're going to have 2 cards that fold in half this way. And it's kind of interesting. Play with a piece of cardstock because you'll feel the difference, and it has to do with the grain of the cardstock. This actually folds fairly easy. Our one cut that way. This one folds a lot harder, and it's really hard to get a nice fold there without scoring. So this one though, we're going to score. Again, we need to go at the halfway mark, which would be 4 1/4, and we'll score that, and it'll fold to make us our nice little card. So 5.5 and 4 1/4 are 2 measurements that you never want to forget. So you're going to always take your 8.5 by 11 and cut it either 4 1/4 the long way or 5.5 the short way, and that will give you your cards. Now, we'll just give you a little trick here, as long as we're just talking about cutting and folding. I'll take another piece. I got a piece of cardstock all over here for you. If you're going to cut a piece in half to make 2 cards out of it, rather than cutting, scoring, and then scoring again, you can actually score the whole sheet at once. So we're going to score at 4 1/4. Always make sure you use the right blade. I've done that before. So we'll score it, and now we'll turn it around this way, and we'll cut at our 5.5. Get the scoring out of there. And look at that. We have just made 2 card fronts without scoring each one individually. So it just saves you one little step. So that's just a little tip for you. Okay, let's set that aside, and I want to talk about neutral cardstock for just a second, because you'll hear me talk a lot about the different kinds of cardstock we have. Whisper White is kind of our basic. It's a staple when it comes to Stampin' Up! Cardstocks. It's very smooth. It's designed to stamp on. Quite often I have people tell me my image just isn't stamping good, or it's bleeding, or it's not inking, the ink isn't very clear on it. 9 times out of 10, it's because you're not using a good cardstock that is really made to stamp on and to take stamping ink. So Whisper White stamps beautifully. It takes the ink beautifully. It's the best cardstock out there. Also comes in very vanilla. let's see. I got pieces all over here. So we'll get a piece of Very Vanilla, but it has all the same properties as the Whisper White. So the Very Vanilla will stamp beautifully as well. Now both of these also come in what we call thick. So we have Whisper White Thick and Whisper White Vanilla. Whisper White, our regular, is a little bit thinner than our normal cardstock. And if you're going to not use a lot of layering on your cards, I really recommend you use the thick. It just has more substance to it, and you know, your card is a lot more solid feeling. So I like to use this for my card bases, but then any layers that we do on top, I'll use the regular Whisper White or Vanilla. And then the other one that I have out here is our Shimmery White. I don't know if you can see, but it has kind of a shimmer to it. This cardstock is wonderful for doing any type of watercoloring, coloring with blender pens. Anytime there's moisture that you're using to color with, you can either use watercolor paper or the Shimmery White, because the Vanilla and your white, Whisper White, really don't take moisture very well. So if you're going to color with one of those methods, this paper, it kind of beads up or fuzzes up on you a little bit, so you don't want to use that. So that's just a little bit about what I call our neutral cardstocks. And we talked about how to cut your bases, whether they're colored or neutral. I mean, you can absolutely cut these to be your cards as well. So I'm going to just set this aside. And I've got a few cards here that I'm just going to use as examples to talk about layers. Now, let's start with this one. Okay, this is cut like so. So our card is 11 this way, 4 1/4 that way. But when I fold it for my card front, we have a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. Critical number to remember. That is always with the size, if you're making normal size cards. 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I mean, you should be able to rattle that off in a heartbeat because you're going to use that measurement all the time. So quite often, as you make the next layer, like you can see my white on here, all you want to do is make it a 1/4 inch smaller. Okay, so we know if we're 5 1/2 by 4 1/4, we go a 1/4 inch on each of the sides, so that brings us down to 4 and 5 1/4. So we can take our white here, and we're going to just cut this at 5 1/4. Okay, our measurement up here, we have 5. There's our 5 1/4, and then we'll turn it and we'll cut at 4. So here is our layer then that would go right on top of this card. So 1/4 inch is a very common measurement. You'll see layers, you know, quite often using the 1/4 inch. So just always, if you can always remember 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, bring it in a 1/4 on each side. So that's how this layer was made. Now you will see on a lot of my cards, well actually we can use all 3 of these, it's not really just, you know, ignore this white here, but how do I figure this layer? Or how do I figure this layer, this designer series paper or sizes? I'm kind of a fanatic about this. I like my stuff to be proportionate. Now obviously this could be just about any size when you layer it on there, but something about it being proportionate, meaning same amount of border top and bottom as left and right. That's kind of my style, but I always do that. So how do I figure out what size to make these pieces? Well, again, if you always remember 5 1/4 by 4, all you need to do is cut your piece the same amount smaller on both sides. Now let me explain. So we know this way it would be 4 1/4. That would be the full card front. Here, we'll just trim this off. It was a little. So we have 4 1/4. Now we're stuck on there. So if I want to, and a measurement I use quite often is I want to make it 3/4 of an inch smaller. So all I do, and you don't even have to remember what the numbers are, we're at 4 1/4. If I'm going to go 3/4 of an inch smaller, I'll go 1/4, 1/4, 1/4. Brings us over here to 3 1/2, and we'll cut it. And then when I turn this, if my normal is 5 1/2, once again, we're going to go 3/4 smaller. So 1/4, 1/4, 1/4 brings me out here to 4 3/4. And this piece, if we put it on this card, you would see that it's proportionately sized right. We have the same amount of borders left and right. And this works with anything. This smaller piece right here, and I got some cheat notes here, is 4 by 2 3/4. So just for kicks, if I was to cut a piece 4 inches here, okay, because I'm designing this card and I knew because of the size of the cross or whatever, I wanted my piece of cardstock to be 4 inches this way. Now we know that this is 5 1/2. So if we're taking 5 1/2 and we are bringing it down to 4, that's a whole 1.5 inches smaller. That means on my other side, I need 1.5 inches smaller as well. Okay, now I hope I didn't lose you there. So we have our 4 coming this way, correct? Which is 1.5 inches smaller than going that way. So we're gonna come this way and do 1.5 inches smaller. Our normal is 4 1/4. So we're gonna go, there's 1/2 inch and 1/2 inch and 1/2 inch. So I brought it all the way back 1.5 inches. You know, you can even, like I said, you don't have to remember those numbers. Just come out here and back up 1.5 inches. And there is the layer that my cross is on here. And again, it's proportionate. If I set it on this, you can see how it's proportionate. So that's all there is to making layers. As long as you know 5 1/2 by 4 1/4, make it smaller the same amount on both sides. Now, I know I drive people crazy because I use 1/8 of an inch a lot. And people are always like, I hate cutting 1/8. They're so hard to cut. Why? If you look at your cutter on here, and let's see, I wonder if I can zoom in. Let's try zooming in a little bit here. So if you look at your cutter, you can see on here, here's our 4, here's our 5. We have our quarter markings on there, which we're all used to quarters. But then in between here, you have your 1/8. This cutter even has 1/16, which I never do, but I always do the 1/8. So as long as you know what your markings are, we have, so there would be 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, 5, 6, 7/8, and there's up to 1 inch. So I don't know why I got in this habit, but I just personally like the look of it, that I like the second layer when I mat things to be 1/8 instead of 1/4. I like the smaller mat there. You can see it on this card. We have a smaller mat with the pool party and then another one with the black on there. This is another good example. This top piece is cut 1/2 inch smaller. So 1/2 inch smaller this way, 1/2 inch smaller that way. So that makes it what? 5 by 3 3/4. So when I go to do the mat, the red on here, I'm gonna go just 1/8 bigger than what I cut this. So let's, you know what, why don't we use that as our example? So let's cut this one down to 1/2 inch smaller. So we're going to go to 3 3/4 because it's 1/2 inch smaller than 4 1/4 by 5. 1/2 inch smaller than 5 1/2. Pretty sure that's the size. Yep, so that's the size I use there. Well, now if I'm ready to mat this, I'm gonna just take a piece of cardstock. And again, you don't have to remember or calculate as long as we know what this is. So we know, okay, that it was 3 3/4. All I'm going to do is I'm going to first place this at 3 3/4, and then I'm going to just slide it over one of those 1/8 markings, which on this cutter it's really 2 ticks, a little tick and a bigger tick, and cut it. And then I can flip it this way, and we know we're starting at 5. Okay, that's what this piece is, and then just move it over 1/8 and cut it. So hopefully, if I did that right, these two should layer up really nice, just like so, and have that smaller border on there. So that's some tips for cutting cardstock and trying to figure out what size layers you want. All of these are a smidgen different. Like I said, I have a cheat sheet here. Like on this one, we have this top layer is 3 1/4 this way by 4 1/2. So 3 1/4 is 1 inch smaller. 4 1/2 is 1 inch smaller. And that's, again, proportionate, and then just 1/8 bigger on the red. So what do you think? Does that help you make figuring out how to cut your cardstock easier? Whether you're cutting an 8 1/2 by 11 sheet to make 2 cards, or just trying to figure out different size layers. So hopefully that was helpful, and I can't wait to come back again next week and share another Stamping Basics video with you. If you have any questions about what I just shared or anything else having to do with Stampin' Up, make sure you get a hold of me. I am here to help you. I am a full-time Stampin' Up demonstrator, and I love helping you with all of your questions, no matter what they would be. And if you're looking for a Stampin' Up demonstrator, I would love to be that person. Get a hold of me. I would be happy to send you a catalog if you don't have a catalog and help you with all of your Stampin' Up needs. So come back again, and I can't wait to share again with you. So have a Stamp Happy day.